Right, hello folks. I just thought I'd come back and do like a quick video while I'm working on my next big video. And yeah, I've just been doing some mapping for that. So while I was doing that, I was just thinking about various bits and pieces as usual, and I just thought I'd do a little video on my motivations for setting up this channel and doing these little videos on the history of the Home Forces in 1940. Yeah, and obviously, as always, this is unscripted, so I'm just going to probably ramble a bit. Um, but I just thought, yeah, it might be useful just to, because I can't remember if I've done it or not, just go over some of the reasons why I set up this channel and why I'm focusing on telling the story of the regular and territorial army, the Commonwealth forces, and the Free Forces in defence of the UK during the Second World War. And firstly, let's start with a bit about me. So, yeah, I'm an archaeologist. I started looking at anti-invasion defences, pillboxes, and stuff at the age of 17 while studying for an archaeology A level, um, and I got pretty fixated on it, and it's been massively interesting. Since then, I've worked as an archaeological consultant for various heritage and archaeology organisations across the UK. Um, and I currently work in a freelance capacity as well, so I provide guidance and information to anyone who's willing to pay me for my expertise, essentially. So, as an archaeologist, the focus I've always had, because it has been on learning things from physical things like pillboxes. So, archaeology is often seen as just finding stuff, and that's it. When the reality is that archaeology starts at the point of finding something. So the role of an archaeologist is to learn about past human societies through the material remains that they left behind. And as such, pillboxes and anti-invasion defences are one of those material remains, and we can learn so much about various things, various aspects of the anti-invasion defence network by looking at pillboxes and anti-tank defences and all this stuff, which is something that goes often overlooked. There's very little analysis of surviving defences and things like that, which is one of the key reasons why these things are poorly represented in terms of preservation and all this stuff. But that's a talk for another time, and might do a video on that specifically with my archaeologist hat on. So currently, yeah, I work as a from time to time as a consultant doing specialist work. My full-time job, I do work in archaeology as well, so I work for one of the country's leading archaeology units, and currently I'm employed in a role that sees me writing lots of reports associated with development works and things like that. So I spend a lot of time writing about ditches that folks in the Iron Age dug, which can be quite interesting sometimes. Um, but this kind of like brings me on to why why I set up the channel. So I'm nearly 30. I turn 38 in 2 months' time, and as a result, that'll be mark the point now where I've been um, researching and investigating and recording anti-invasion defences for over 20 years. There's not many archaeologists that can say that. And as a result of that, over this space of time, I've been able to see many things and spot many trends in terms of how anti-invasion defences are perceived, not just in archaeology, but also by members of the public and in history and all that. And over these years, it's just become abundantly clear how little we know about not only the surviving defences themselves, but how they were operated, who operated them, why they were built, where they are, and things like that. And as a specialist in this period, it's quite easy for me to say that this is kind of like one of the last untold stories of the Second World War, which is a bit of a trope that pops up all the time. And in the terms of the anti-invasion defences, they are massively under-researched. And in terms of research, the research always tends to focus on the German invasion plans, which is something we'll be looking at in the next video, which is, yeah, we'll be looking at the. I'm just going to say. So the next video, I'm going to spend a long time explaining the invasion threats to the UK during the Second World War from the perspective of the Home Forces, which is something that's very rarely done and has rarely been actually researched and documented and presented in any way, shape, or form. So it's going to be a very big video because I'll be using a vast amount of primary resources and showing you the first-hand accounts of how the invasion threat was perceived from the perspective of the home forces. So as a rather than from the invading force, which is something that's rarely done. Anyway, so yeah, over the many years, it's just become abundantly clear how little we know about these defences. And whenever whenever a pillbox pops up in the media, when one gets demolished and all this stuff, there's always 99.9% of the time some mention of Dad's army, some mention of the Home Guard. And the reality is that during the Second World War, the anti-invasion defences were the primary network of defence of the home forces, primarily the regulars and territorial army. So you're looking at 29 divisions, give or take, and I've still not worked out how many troops that would have been. 1 second. Number. Sorry, this isn't going to be very division. Sorry, this isn't going to be very interesting. But I'm going to have to work this out. Right. So according to Wikipedia, 1939 a division had 13,863 men. Let's take that, times that by 29. So, following the fall of France, there were 402,000, is that right? Oh, sorry, I am terrible with numbers. Yeah, 402,000, or at least 402,027 soldiers of the regular and territorial army, Commonwealth forces, and free forces deployed in the UK defending the country against invasion on the front line. So, you think about today, whenever the anti-invasion defences are mentioned, whenever one pops up in the newspapers or on TV, the focus is solely on the Home Guard. That means that the memory and the experiences of over 400,000 individual soldiers is not told, goes completely forgotten, and the effort and time they put into not only training in the UK but defending the UK has all but been forgotten. And also, when you start to look at the war diaries and the other sources of information as well, it's abundantly clear that a lot of soldiers died on the home front as well within the home forces, from enemy action and bombing and strafing, all the way through to accidents, so treading on mines in minefields, getting hit by cars, things like that, and accidents. So that sacrifice as well goes largely unforgotten, unacknowledged. And I always find it really, really weird that, you hear a lot of the time people going, oh, lest we forget and all this stuff. And it's just like, I think, well, you've already forgotten, especially when it comes to the home front, the Second World War and the anti-invasion defences. The memory and the role of over 400,000 people has been forgotten. Not, and that's just looking at the army, and not including the the RAF and the ATS and the other auxiliary services and everything else. That story is, well, those people are by and large forgotten um, as a result of this perception, thanks to Dad's army, that it was the Home Guard that were doing everything. And the Home Guard are adequately remembered, and rightly so. They volunteered to do this thing, but their role is largely overstated, especially in 1940 and 41, and the actual context in which they were operating and deployed needs to be told. It's I just find it very strange that 80 years after the Second World War, we knew more about the home forces in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War than we do today. I just find that extremely odd that this aspect of the home front in the UK is very poorly understood. And I've lost my train of thought now. But yeah, in that respect, so whenever these anti-invasion defences are brought to public attention, the focus is always on the Home Guard, and over 400,000 troops are essentially forgotten. And then this has the knock-on effect of the anti-invasion defences in the home, or the anti-invasion defences today, being perceived as crap, rubbish. Whenever they pop up, someone who's done literally zero research will pop up and go, "Oh, they'd have been rubbish. The Germans would have gone straight through them and gone around them and all this stuff." And it's like, yeah, that's based on literally zero, based on nothing. Um, based on literally zero research and zero actual understanding of the extent of the defences and the measures with which to which the commander in chief of home forces and everyone involved went to defend the country. And again, this is one of the reasons why I'm very keen to do these videos. It's to promote a better understanding of the country's defence in 1940 as one of the least well understood periods of the country's history. What else? And I'm also fed up of seeing tropes about Dad's Army whenever a pillbox pops up. You know, it's just like, yeah, it's old. You know, time to move on from that now, and it's about time we had a better and accurate understanding of the anti-invasion defences. Also, the other thing with this is that the story is massively complex. It is extremely difficult to tell a kind of nationwide one-size-fits-all story in terms of this because the amount of planning that went into defending various parts of the country was planned in such meticulous detail that everywhere was defended in a different way based on topography and defence needs and proximity to likely invasion, likely points of invasion, for example. So the subject itself is massively generalised based on this one, basically a lack of research, two, oversimplification of the how the country was defended, and three, this perception that it was all the home guard. So, yeah, like I say, the anti-invasion defence and the home forces themselves, their history is massively complex and not as simple as just saying, you know, troops were deployed here and that's it. You know, you've got standing orders and things like that which change on a monthly basis. You've got troops coming in and out of various areas. It is massively complex, and when you start to look at the period documents, this is when it starts to get really quite confusing, you know, because you've got to have a really analytical approach to this to work out how things were changing over time, looking at what units were where, how many units were within a given area. And as an archaeologist, you know, recording a pillbox is relatively straightforward because there's I've developed a set amount of criteria which you can use to learn about a pillbox. But when you start to put the historical aspect in, it gets massively complex. Yeah, and that's again something that's overlooked, mainly due to a lack of research. And what else am I going to say? Really? Yeah. So I set up this channel to show what I learned, to share what I've learned over the past 20 years, to help hopefully make other people aware of how complex the home forces were and their history was, how important they were to defending the country, how important their story is, and how it needs to be told today and why it needs to be told, and why it's important we have a much better understanding of the sacrifice made by the people that were deployed within the home forces. I was just thinking about it the other day, and in other talks I've said, you know, it's like trying to, you know, focusing solely on the home guard is like trying to understand D-Day by just looking at the military police, for example, or the beach officers that brought the ships in, for example, or trying to understand the Battle of Britain by just looking at the RAF ground crews. You know, these units in isolation played a vital role, but you cannot get the overall picture of. You can't get a good understanding of the actual complexity and history of a thing by just looking at sole units. And it was the other day as well. I was just thinking as well that whenever someone's doing a talk on anti-invasion defences and they solely focus on the home guard, it's like trying to tell the story of the Battle of Britain without making any mention of the pilots. You know, you're making no mention of. There's no, you know, if you're not mentioning the actual frontline fighting troops, then you know you're going to get this very skewed and poor understanding of the subject. And yeah, so that's it. Just made me think the other day, like I say, if someone tried telling the story of the Battle of Britain and made no mention of the pilots, people would kick off, and fairly certain that would be called out. But in terms of the anti-invasion defences, it's perfectly fine for some reason. Anyway, coming up to nearly like 15 minutes, and I thought I want to try and bridge the gap between my next video and now because it is going to be a while. I've just started piecing bits and pieces together now, and I want to get I want it to be something different, something new, something that's not been done before, and accurately show the various invasion threats as they were perceived by the Home Forces, and try and move things away from this perception that only the South Coast was vulnerable and nowhere else, and all this stuff, and that the invasion threat was not taken seriously, which massively hampers understanding today. Anyway, as always, I hope you found that interesting. It's been all right to just sit in front of my computer and talk to myself for 15 minutes. But yeah, I just thought I'd do a little update. Hopefully, we'll get the next video out in the next month or so. But it is going to be bigger. I might have split in two or three parts, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it's going to be good. So thank you all, and I'll see you later.